Samuel Whitmore sat in his office, staring at a stack of customer complaints. His hotel chain, one he had built from the ground up, was supposed to be a place where every guest felt welcome. But lately, something had felt off. The complaints weren't just about small inconveniences. They spoke of rude staff, dismissive customer service, and a cold atmosphere. The worst of them all came from a location that used to be one of his best. Guests complained about being ignored at the front desk, staff acting unprofessional, and worst of all, some even mentioned being judged for how they looked. Samuel ran a hand through his short, graying hair. It didn't sit right with him. He had always prided himself on creating a business that treated people with respect, no matter who they were. He had sent his district manager to check it out, but the report he got back was vague. Everything seemed fine. Fine wasn't good enough. He decided right then and there he was going undercover. A week later, Samuel stood in front of the hotel, unrecognizable. He had let his beard grow out, wore a slightly wrinkled jacket, and had a baseball cap pulled low over his eyes. To the world, he was just another traveler, one who looked like he hadn't stayed in a high-end hotel before. This location was one of 6 in the region, but he had never personally met most of the staff here. With a corporate structure in place, employees rarely knew the CEO by face. It was perfect. He pushed through the glass doors and stepped into the lobby. Immediately, his eyes were drawn to the front desk. A young woman in a sleek uniform stood behind the counter, chatting with a bellboy. Her name tag read Jessica. At first, she didn't notice him, too busy scrolling through her phone. But then the door opened behind him, and a poorly dressed family walked in, a mother, father, and 2 young kids. Their clothes were worn, their shoes scuffed. Jessica took one look at them and let out a short, mocking laugh. She turned to the bellboy and whispered something. He hesitated before chuckling softly. Samuel felt his blood boil. The father approached the desk, visibly uncomfortable. "Hi, we have a reservation under the name Carter." Jessica barely looked up. "Are you sure?" she asked, her tone laced with skepticism. "Yes," the mother said, shifting nervously. "I booked it online." Jessica sighed dramatically, typing into the computer. Well, you should know we require a credit card for incidentals." "We have one," the father assured her, pulling out a worn wallet. Jessica's expression didn't soften. In fact, she looked almost amused. "Just making sure," she said lightly. "You know, for damages." Samuel clenched his jaw. He had seen enough, but he wasn't going to blow his cover just yet. Instead, he stepped forward. "Excuse me, I'd like to check in too." Jessica barely gave him a glance. "Name?" "Thomas Walker," he said, using the alias he had planned. She tapped her keyboard lazily, then slid a paper toward him. "Sign here." That was it. No welcome, no eye contact, just pure indifference. The family was still waiting, clearly uncomfortable. The little girl clung to her mother's side, shifting from foot to foot. Samuel signed the paper slowly, then turned to the family. "First time staying here?" he asked casually. The father nodded. "Yeah. We saved up for this trip." Jessica snorted softly, but when Samuel looked at her, she quickly turned back to her screen, pretending to be busy. Samuel exhaled. He had to see more before making his move. "Hope you enjoy your stay," he said kindly to the family before taking his room key. But in his head, he was already planning. Because this wasn't over. Not by a long shot. Samuel took his room key and walked toward the elevators, his mind already working through what he had just witnessed. His gut told him that what he saw at the front desk wasn't just an isolated incident. If Jessica was comfortable enough to act that way in front of guests, it meant there was a deeper problem with the hotel's culture. He needed to see more. Inside his hotel room, he set his bag down and took a slow look around. The space was clean, but there were small signs of neglect. The carpet had faint stains near the foot of the bed, and the bathroom mirror had smudges that housekeeping had missed. The attention to detail, the standard he had built his company on, was slipping. He stepped out into the hallway, making his way toward the staff areas. He wanted to get a sense of how employees treated each other when they weren't performing for guests. As he walked past the housekeeping cart parked outside one of the rooms, he noticed a young woman kneeling on the floor, scrubbing at a spot on the carpet with clear frustration. Her uniform was slightly wrinkled and her face was damp with sweat. "You okay?" Samuel asked, stopping beside her. She looked up, startled, then quickly straightened. "Oh, yeah, just trying to get this stain out, been here for weeks." Samuel crouched slightly, inspecting the spot. "Shouldn't they have replaced this section by now?" She let out a quiet laugh, but there was no humor in it. "They don't care. As long as it looks decent enough, it stays." Samuel studied her for a moment. "What's your name?" "Maria," she said, brushing a stray hair from her forehead. "You've been here long?" 2 years, she said. "Long enough to know how things really work." Samuel leaned against the wall. "And how do things really work?" Maria hesitated, glancing down the hall before lowering her voice. "They push us to clean rooms fast, but they don't give us enough time. If we complain, they say we're making excuses, and if a guest complains about something we missed, we get written up." Samuel frowned. "Who's they?" "The managers, mostly Mr. Carter." Samuel filed the name away. "And Jessica," Maria sighed. "She's the worst. She acts like she owns the place. If she doesn't like how someone looks, she treats them like garbage. A few guests have even complained, but nothing happens." Samuel nodded, his suspicions confirmed. This wasn't just Jessica being rude, this was a management failure. Before he could ask more, a sharp voice called down the hall. "Maria, stop slacking and finish your rooms." Samuel turned to see a man in his late 40s standing at the far end of the corridor. He was thickset, with a neatly pressed suit and a clipboard in hand. His expression was one of impatience. Maria's shoulders tensed immediately. "Yes, Mr. Carter," she said quickly, grabbing her cleaning supplies. Samuel watched as she hurried into the next room, then turned his attention to the manager. Carter gave him a quick, dismissive glance. "You a guest?" Samuel nodded. "Just checking in." Carter barely acknowledged him before moving on, barking instructions at another employee down the hallway. Samuel exhaled slowly. He had seen enough for today. It was clear that the culture of this hotel was broken, and it started from the top. That night, he sat in his room making notes. Jessica's behavior at the front desk wasn't an isolated issue, it was a symptom of a larger problem. Leadership had set a tone that allowed disrespect and carelessness to thrive. And that had to change. Tomorrow, he would push further. Because this wasn't just about holding one employee accountable, it was about fixing the entire system. Samuel woke early, determined to dig deeper into the hotel's operations. The front desk incident had shown him how guests were treated, and speaking with Maria had confirmed that the staff suffered under poor leadership. But he needed more than surface-level observations. He wanted to see the full extent of the problem before he revealed himself. He dressed in the same casual clothes from the day before and headed toward the hotel's dining area. Breakfast service was included for guests, and it was a perfect opportunity to observe both staff and customer interactions. As he entered, he noticed an older couple standing near the food station, looking confused. The man was pointing at the empty trays where eggs and bacon should have been, while his wife scanned the room, searching for an employee. A worker in a uniform stood nearby, using a rag to wipe down a counter at a painfully slow pace, clearly uninterested in the guest's dilemma. Samuel approached the couple. "Everything okay?" the woman sighed. "We were just wondering if they'll be bringing out more food. There's barely anything left." Samuel turned to the staff member. "Excuse me, do you know when they'll be restocking the food?" The worker barely looked up. "Whenever the kitchen gets to it." The response was cold, dismissive. Samuel studied the employee's posture leaning against the counter, eyes unfocused. There was no urgency, no sense of service. "Is there someone in charge here?" Samuel asked. The worker shrugged. "Managers in the back." Samuel gave a polite nod to the couple before heading toward the kitchen. He pushed through the swinging door and was immediately hit with the sounds of clattering pans and low murmurs. Inside, 2 employees were rushing to prepare more food, their faces tight with focus. Across the room, a man in a suit stood with his arms crossed, watching without offering any assistance. Samuel recognized him instantly. Carter, the same manager who had scolded Maria the day before. One of the cooks, a younger man with tired eyes, glanced up. "Sir, we're doing our best." "We just ran out faster than expected." Carter shook his head. "That's not my problem, you should have planned better." Samuel stepped forward. "Sounds like they could use some extra hands." Carter turned sharply, eyes narrowing. "Who are you?" "Just a guest," Samuel said casually. "One who noticed that breakfast service is falling behind." Carter's expression flickered with irritation. "We're handling it." Samuel glanced at the two cooks. They were clearly overworked, moving quickly to meet the demand while Carter stood by, offering no support. "I'm sure you are," Samuel said evenly. "But maybe handling it means stepping in when your team needs help." Carter scoffed. "That's not how this works. They have a job to do. If they can't keep up, that's on them." Samuel held his gaze for a moment before nodding slowly. This wasn't just laziness, it was a complete lack of leadership. Carter wasn't interested in solving problems. He was interested in assigning blame. He left the kitchen without another word, but his mind was racing. The problem at this hotel wasn't just about one rude employee at the front desk. It was systemic. Leadership had fostered an environment where dismissiveness trickled down to every level of service. Samuel returned to the lobby, watching as guests checked out. Jessica was at the front desk again, her demeanor unchanged. A man in a business suit approached to ask about late checkout. She barely glanced at him before giving a curt response. Then a woman with a stroller stepped up, asking about available cribs for her infant. Jessica sighed audibly before answering, her tone clearly impatient. The woman looked uncomfortable, shifting from one foot to the other. Samuel had seen enough. He stepped forward, placing his room key on the counter. Jessica barely acknowledged him. "Checking out?" she asked flatly. "Yes," Samuel said. "And I'd like to speak with the general manager." Jessica finally looked up, her expression shifting. Why?" "Because I have some concerns," Samuel said simply. Jessica hesitated, then reached for the phone. After a brief conversation, she hung up. "Mr. Carter will meet you in the office." Samuel nodded and walked toward the hallway leading to the administrative offices. Inside, Carter sat behind a desk, looking mildly annoyed. "You needed something?" Samuel shut the door behind him and took a seat. His expression remained calm, but his voice carried unmistakable authority. "Yes, I think it's time I introduced myself properly." Carter leaned back slightly, eyes narrowing. "My name is Samuel Whitmore," he continued. "I own this hotel." The color drained from Carter's face. His posture stiffened, and for the first time he looked uncertain. Samuel let the silence stretch, watching as the realization settled in. Then he spoke again, his tone colder now. "I've spent the last day watching how this hotel operates. I've seen guests ignored, employees mistreated, and a complete lack of leadership from management." Carter opened his mouth, but Samuel cut him off. "Jessica, your front desk employee, openly mocked a family in the lobby. I saw it with my own eyes. She treated them as if they didn't belong because of how they looked, and you let that happen." Carter's mouth pressed into a thin line. I wasn't aware of that situation." Samuel's gaze sharpened. "Then that's another failure. Because if you don't know what's happening on your own floor, what exactly are you managing?" Carter's fingers tapped against the desk, a nervous tick. "Look, no," Samuel said firmly. "No excuses. I saw how you handled the kitchen staff this morning. Instead of supporting them, you stood back and criticized. You let problems fester instead of solving them." Carter swallowed hard. You're done here," Samuel said, standing. "Effective immediately." Carter's face went pale. "Wait." Samuel didn't wait. He turned and walked out of the office, his decision final. Outside, Jessica was still at the front desk. She looked up as he approached, her expression wary. Samuel's voice carried through the lobby. "You are also no longer employed here." Jessica's eyes widened. "What?" "You heard me," Samuel said. "This is not how my business treats people." Jessica sputtered, looking around as if someone might back her up. No one did. Samuel turned his attention to the rest of the staff. Some had stopped what they were doing, watching the scene unfold. "This hotel is changing," he said, "and it starts today." There was a long silence. Then, slowly, some of the employees nodded. Samuel exhaled. There was still a lot of work to do, but this was the first step. The tension in the lobby lingered long after Jessica stormed out. Employees exchanged glances, some shifting uncomfortably, others looking cautiously hopeful. Samuel stood firm, scanning the room. He had removed the two most obvious problems, but that didn't mean the hotel's issues were solved. A culture like this didn't form overnight, and it wouldn't be fixed with a single decision. He turned toward the employees who remained. Their faces held a mix of uncertainty and quiet curiosity. He had spent years at the top, making decisions based on reports and numbers, but now he was seeing firsthand what those reports never captured. He focused on the young bellboy Jessica had been whispering to the day before. The kid looked nervous, avoiding eye contact. Samuel approached. "What's your name?" "Ethan," the bellboy answered quickly. "You've been here long?" "Almost a year." Samuel studied him. The hesitation in his posture, the darting glance toward the exit, he had seen this before in employees who weren't sure where they stood. "I noticed you with Jessica yesterday," Samuel said. "You laughed at what she said about that family." Ethan's face paled slightly. He straightened, shaking his head. "I didn't mean, I'm not here to fire you," Samuel interrupted. "I want to know why you went along with it." Ethan swallowed hard, then exhaled. "She's been here longer than me. Everyone knew she could make your life miserable if she wanted. He hesitated. "I didn't want to be her next target." Samuel nodded slowly. This was what he had suspected. Jessica hadn't just been rude to guests, she had influenced the entire work environment. Employees who should have spoken up stayed quiet out of fear. "Did you ever report her?" Ethan let out a short, tired laugh. "To who, Carter?" He shook his head. He didn't care. "If anything, he played favorites. If you complained, you got fewer shifts." Samuel's jaw tightened. The more he uncovered, the clearer it became this wasn't just about individuals behaving badly. The leadership had allowed this to fester. He turned to the rest of the staff. "I need honesty from you all. The problems here don't start and end with two people. I want to hear what's really been happening." There was a moment of silence. Then Maria stepped forward. "Housekeeping is always understaffed," she said. "They push us to turn over rooms fast, but they never listen when we say it's too much. And if we don't finish in time, we get blamed." A man in a maintenance uniform spoke up next. "Supplies take forever to get approved. We're told to make do instead of actually fixing things properly." A woman from the restaurant area hesitated before adding, "We're not given enough food during breakfast shifts. Every morning it's a scramble because we run out and guests get upset." Samuel listened, absorbing every detail. He had always believed in running his business with integrity, but now he saw how easily that vision had been warped when he wasn't paying attention. He glanced around the room. Starting today, things change. A few skeptical looks passed between employees. They had heard promises before. "First," Samuel continued, "we're bringing in a new manager, someone who actually listens and leads." Maria crossed her arms. "And if they're just like Carter—" "They won't be," Samuel said firmly. "I'll be making that decision myself." He turned to the restaurant worker. "Tomorrow you'll get the supplies you need. No more running out of food mid-service." She nodded, but there was still hesitation in her expression. "Maintenance is getting a full budget review," he added, looking at the maintenance worker. "If something needs fixing, it gets fixed." Then he faced Maria. "And housekeeping isn't going to be pushed past their limits anymore. If we need more staff, we hire more staff." The employees exchanged glances. They wanted to believe him, but trust wouldn't be rebuilt in a single conversation. Samuel knew that. He ran a hand through his beard, exhaling. "I know words don't mean much if nothing changes, so here's what I'm going to do. I'll be staying here for the next 2 weeks, not as a CEO, but as part of the team." That got their attention. "You'll see for yourselves how serious I am," he continued. "I want to know what works, what doesn't, and what needs to be fixed, and when I leave, I'll make sure the changes actually happen." A few employees nodded. Others still looked uncertain. But there was something different in the air now, something lighter. Samuel turned toward Ethan. "You're young. You've got a choice now. Do you want to be someone who follows the worst examples, or do you want to be someone better?" Ethan hesitated, then nodded. "I want to be better." "Good," Samuel said. "Then prove it." The bellboy straightened, determination settling into his features. Samuel stepped back, taking in the room one last time. This wasn't going to be easy. He had let too much slip through the cracks, and now he had to rebuild not just policies, but trust. But he would. Because no one would ever walk into one of his hotels again and feel like they didn't belong. Samuel returned to his temporary office in the hotel, an unremarkable room tucked behind the administrative hallway. The desk was cluttered with reports, guest feedback, employee schedules, maintenance logs. He had spent the past 2 days deeply embedded in the hotel's day-to-day operations, working alongside staff, observing interactions, and listening to concerns. The surface-level problems had been obvious from the start, but now he was uncovering the deeper structural issues that had allowed them to persist for so long. The most pressing issue was hiring a new general manager. Carter had left a vacuum in leadership, and while some employees were relieved by his absence, others were uneasy, unsure of what came next. Samuel knew that bringing in the right person was the key to sustaining the changes he wanted to implement. It wasn't just about finding someone with experience, it had to be someone who understood the culture he wanted to build. He had already spoken with corporate about potential candidates, but he wanted input from the employees on the ground. They were the ones who had suffered under poor management. They deserved a say in who would be leading them next. Later that afternoon, he gathered a group of senior employees in a small conference room. Maria had been invited along with the head of maintenance, the lead restaurant worker, and a senior member of housekeeping. Ethan was there as well, though he looked slightly out of place among the more experienced staff. Still, Samuel had seen a shift in him since their last conversation. The young bellboy had started carrying himself differently, more aware of his role in the hotel's culture. Samuel leaned forward, resting his hands on the table. The employees sat across from him, waiting. "We need a new general manager," he said plainly. "I have a few candidates in mind, but before I make a decision, I want to hear from all of you." Maria was the first to speak. "We need someone who actually listens, not just someone who nods and ignores us later." The head of maintenance, a man named Lewis, added, "And someone who understands the job, not just the numbers." Carter only cared about what looked good on paper. He never saw what it took to actually keep this place running. The restaurant worker, a woman named Denise, crossed her arms. "We need someone who respects the staff, not just the ones in suits." Samuel nodded. "I agree, that's exactly what I'm looking for." He glanced at Ethan. "What about you?" Ethan hesitated. "I think we need someone who makes people want to do their best, not because they're scared, but because they actually care about the place." Samuel studied him for a moment, then turned back to the group. "I have a candidate I'm considering. Her name is Rebecca Hayes. She's managed one of our smaller hotels for the past 5 years. Strong track record, good reputation. But more importantly, I've spoken to employees under her, and they all say the same thing: she runs a tight operation, but she's fair. She's the kind of leader people trust." Maria narrowed her eyes slightly. "And she won't come in here just to keep things the same." Samuel shook his head. "I want change, and I need someone who can make sure it lasts." "Rebecca isn't afraid to make tough calls, but she also knows how to build a team. I think she's exactly what this hotel needs." Lewis exhaled. "If she's really like that, then she's a step up from Carter." Denise nodded. "Worth a shot." Maria still looked skeptical, but she didn't argue. Ethan simply listened, absorbing the conversation. "I'll have her here by the end of the week," Samuel said. "In the meantime, I'm making some immediate changes." He pulled out a notepad and began listing off adjustments. Housekeeping would get additional staff to ease the workload. The restaurant would receive a structured inventory system to prevent shortages. Maintenance would be given a clear budget for necessary repairs. None of these were temporary fixes. They were structural changes designed to set a new standard. As the meeting wrapped up, Maria lingered behind while the others left. She hesitated before speaking. "You're really staying here the whole 2 weeks?" Samuel nodded. "I said I would." She considered him for a moment, then nodded back. "Good, because people are watching." "They're waiting to see if this is real." Samuel met her gaze. "It is." She studied him for another moment, then finally left the room. That evening, Samuel walked through the hotel, observing. The atmosphere already felt different. Employees moved with more confidence. The tension that had lingered after Carter and Jessica's departure was still there, but it was beginning to fade. At the front desk, Ethan was assisting a guest. His tone was professional, his posture upright. When he noticed Samuel, he gave a small nod, not of fear, but of acknowledgement. Samuel nodded back. There was still a long way to go. But for the first time in a long time, he felt like this hotel was on the right path.